his lecture from this morning, but with specific relevance to an abnormal saline, I think you called it earlier. So thank you, Dilip.
Thanks, Tony. I'd like to start this debate off with a question. Could I have a show of hands, please? How many of you know when 0.9% saline was first used intravenously? 1. Okay. 2. So I start off with a quote from Theodore Billroth. He says, "Only the man who is familiar with the art and science of the past is competent to aid in its progress in the future." And this is precisely one of the problems we have with 0.9% saline. Now, we phoned Baxter the other day and we found that in the UK, 10 million litres of 0.9 saline were being used per year. And despite being one of the most frequently used solutions in hospital practice, for resuscitation, replacement and maintenance, the origins of 0.9% saline are quite obscure. So we went about to review the literature, and if you read some of the papers, most of them say that the origins of 0.9% saline stem back to the 1831 and 1832 cholera epidemic that swept past northeast England. And 1850?
That was my guess.
Well, the epidemic was in 1831 and 1832, and William O'Shaughnessy studied some of these patients, and he found that their blood was dark red. And he suggested that these patients should be infused with oxygenated salts to improve the color of the blood, because he thought the salts would improve the oxygen delivery to the tissues. And this is a classic paper that he wrote. It's a one-page paper in The Lancet, which is still considered to be one of the classic one-page papers ever written. And he found that there was about a 15% loss of plasma volume in patients who had dehydration because of the diarrhea. And this was O'Shaughnessy's recommendation. However, the credit for the first proper intravenous infusion of a salt solution goes to Thomas Latta, who was in Edinburgh. And again, people say he infused normal saline. What he infused was nothing similar to normal saline. The solution he used, after you converted from grains and drachms and whatever, amounts to 48 to 68 millimoles of sodium per litre, 39 to 59 millimoles of chloride per litre, and 9 millimoles of bicarbonate per litre. Needless to say, the patient died, but Latta did make an advance in intravenous fluid therapy. Over the next year, Latta published a few more letters in The Lancet, and his third and fourth solutions again bore no resemblance to 0.9% saline. In fact, if you look at his fourth solution, it's closer to Hartmann's solution than to 0.9% saline. Unfortunately, Latta died of tuberculosis a year after he published these papers, and so we don't hear of any more research from him. Now, between 1849 and 1891, there are a host of papers written, most of them in The Lancet, looking at different compositions of intravenous fluids, and none of these actually bear any resemblance to 0.9% saline. Churton first called his solution normal saline, but when we pulled out Churton's paper, we found that it had 150 millimoles of sodium, 128 millimoles of chloride, a bit of potassium, and a significant amount of bicarbonate. So not the normal saline that we know of. Spencer again produced a solution in 1892 that he referred to as a normal salt solution, but when you read his paper, he doesn't provide us with any information about the composition of this solution. Does anyone know who this is? He's a chap called Hartold Jakob Hamburger, and he was a clinical chemist, much like Peter, and he was doing some experiments on osmotic fragility of red blood cells. And he found that the freezing point of 0.9% saline was the same as that of human serum, and he also found that red blood cells were least likely to lyse in this solution. So Hamburger called this solution indifferent saline, meaning that it had no effect on the red blood cell. And somehow that term indifferent got corrupted to physiological or normal, and that's how this solution came into being. I still don't know when the first infusion of 0.9% saline was given, because I haven't been able to find that out. But Sidney Ringer in London was doing his frog heart beating experiments. And he used to come to the lab every day, take the frog heart, dip it in 0.9% saline, and he found that the heart stopped beating in a few seconds.